So, a few weeks ago, Diamond Comics, the distributor for all major comic books across America and many other countries around the world, announced that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, they were going to be canceling all their current orders. Meaning, there just weren't going to be any new comic books for a while. Now, since then, we have begun to see some titles returning to stores. However, when this news story broke, I made a video about it, a card for it should be popping up right now, in which I said that there were many problems with Diamond Comics, but because of everything else going on in the world at the moment, now was not the time to talk about that. Now is the time to talk about that. Folks, I know we live in an uncertain world, a scary world, a world where it feels like everything is changing from day to day, and in a world like that, sometimes all you want is some stability. So this week, when DC Comics announced that they'd be ending their 25-year-long relationship with Diamond, comic book fans realized they would not be getting their wish and the world would continue to spin further and further out of control. Now, this raises several questions about the future of comic books. If DC is no longer with Diamond, does that mean that the price of books could go up? After all, Diamond has pretty much set the standard rate of books over the years, and because of how they distribute titles, they give stores certain discounts considering how many copies they buy, which comes back around to deciding how much a company makes off their books. Meaning that if a smaller company is about to take over DC distribution from Diamond, they might not be able to guarantee certain discounts since they won't be shipping out as many titles. This means the price of titles could rise, and it also means that stores could get hurt. Plus, many comic book stores have developed positive relationships with Diamond, so not only are they now worried that it will cost them more to carry DC Comics, but they also feel betrayed. Some stores have said that they will no longer advertise DC Comics in their stores, or they're going to move DC's new releases away from the front of the store in order to advertise the companies that still distribute with Diamond. And considering that Diamond also handles most comic book sales overseas, I know a lot of non-US residents right now are worried about their access to these titles. Most comics, when distributed to other countries, already see a massive price spike, so could they become even more expensive? Will they even be able to be shipped overseas at all now? Will these new distributors even be able to handle something like that? Also, smaller comic book shops are worried that this could be the start of the end for them because DC is going to two new distributors, Lunar and UCS for their weekly comics, and UCS is owned by Midtown Comics, one of the largest comic book stores in America that ships books worldwide. So many people have already viewed them as a competitor to local comic book stores, so now DC just basically went to that competitor and gave them full power over everyone else's books. It feels like if your local mom and pop burger joint had to start getting their meat from McDonald's. Feels like a bit of a conflict of interest, doesn't it? So yes, the whole situation with DC leaving Diamond has left a lot of people feeling rather upset. It's caused a bit of an uproar. There's a lot of people who are angry. There's a lot of people who are scared right now, and I can understand that. However, there's one side to this story that really hasn't gotten a lot of attention. There's one argument that I haven't really heard anyone making, and I feel like that's a shame because, in all honesty, I feel like this is one of the most important sides to this story. I feel like if you're going to be discussing the idea of DC leaving Diamond, there's something that absolutely needs to be brought up. Yes, Diamond Comics is currently and has always been a terrible, terrible company. And I say that as someone who has not only worked with them as a comic shop employee, but as someone who personally knows people who have worked at Diamond headquarters. But why are they so bad? Well, the most obvious reason is because they're a monopoly. When it comes to comic book distribution, they're literally the only game in town. And when you're the only game in town, you can set the rules and treat everyone around you however you want because what are they going to do? Go to someone else? There is nobody else. Monopolies are one of the greatest dangers to our economy, our lifestyle, our health, and society in general. Cough, cough. But how did Diamond become a monopoly? Well, that's a long and detailed story, a story that began back in the 1980s. Back then, there were several rival distribution companies out there, and Diamond was at the time one of the stronger competitors on the market. When it comes to comic distribution, let's be honest, it's a tough game to get into. Nobody starts making or selling comics because they like the stability and fame and fortune it brings. Comics are a tough mistress. If you're in this industry and you can pay your rent, well then congratulations, you won. So the fact that Diamond was actually making money while several of their competitors were folding almost as quickly as they appeared, it did speak highly of their business savvy. However, they weren't the only company out there doing well at the time. Okay, this is comic distributions we're talking about. Doing well is up for interpretation. But let's say they weren't the only ones able to survive. There were other companies that they had to compete against, and Diamond didn't like that. So they took their money and hired Chuck Parker, a self-proclaimed no-nonsense accountant, to try and grow their business. And he took the profits that they had and invested them in a way that would guarantee Diamond's future success. Now, what did he do with that money? Did he A. invest in a relationships campaign to improve connections between Diamond and comic companies? B. provide their employees with more benefits and wage increases to make the company a more attractive option to workers? C. launch an ad campaign to increase business for the titles that Diamond distributed, thereby gaining the trust of comic shop retailers and companies alike? Or D. bought their competition and shut them down? I'm going to give you all just one chance to get this one right. Yes, in the mid-90s, Diamond turned to all their competitors who weren't folding under their own weight and started to buy them up. And in all fairness, they did purchase these companies for what seemed like a fair price, but after purchasing them, they took their stock and absorbed it into themselves, making them stronger, helping them to have even more influence with Marvel and DC to acquire special pricing on their trades, thereby damaging the remaining distributors even more until they were all that was left. And you might think, okay, I'm sure that sounds bad, but if it actually crossed any sort of a line, then the government would get involved, right? Funny story, that's exactly what happened. In 1997, after the last competitor for the distribution throne, Heroes World, ended up crumbling, leaving Diamond as the only company left, the Department of Justice launched an antitrust investigation into them. However, they found that Diamond did not count as a monopoly because even though they now distributed all comic books, they didn't distribute non-comic books. Which is kind of like saying if Konami bought up every single video game company on the planet, they wouldn't count as a monopoly because they didn't make board games. Thanks, Department of Justice, you're really batting 1,000 on this one. And that's how Diamond Comics became a monopoly, through a very poor understanding of the industry on behalf of the United States government, and also through the cutthroat tactics of Chuck Parker. But luckily for us, Chuck Parker after this left Diamond and disappeared just as mysteriously as he had arrived. He was lost in the wind, never to be heard from again. Huh? Was that? Oh, he actually joined the company permanently after that, and he's now the executive vice president and COO? Ah. Well, I guess after working with the company for so many years, he must have eventually developed a love for the medium and has used that love to try and improve the entire industry. And what's that yet again? He actually hasn't done any of that, and Diamond employees have actually gone on the record as saying, quote, he cares nothing about comics, to him it's dollars and cents. Oh! And they said that as a compliment? I see. Wow, when you put it like that, having somebody left in charge of your company and the decisions that would end up making and basing all those decisions solely around dollar amounts, that might work in some industries, but in an industry that deals exclusively with art forms and creators, that never really works out that well, especially when it comes to the smaller creators out there. And when talking about smaller creators in the comic book industry, I'm of course talking about the indie books. But hey, listen, indie books have been a vital part of the comic book industry for decades now. I'm sure that even if the people in charge of Diamond only care about dollar amounts, they would still understand why indie books are important, and they wouldn't screw over the indie creators just like that, would they? Listen, I know I'm talking a lot of smack about Diamond, but I do realize this is a business. You can't run an industry just on high hopes and a love for the product. Tough choices have to be made. Sometimes you do have to be cold, and often this treatment is reserved for the smaller parts of said industry, and when that comes to comics, that means the indie books. And you know something? I have to be honest with you guys, early on, Diamond was not that bad when it came to indie books. They had to set a cutoff point for how much money your book would make in order for them to distribute it, and that cutoff point was set at $1,500, which honestly wasn't so bad. Here's where it became so bad. In the late 2000s, Diamond, almost overnight, with no warning, increased that cutoff point from 1,500 to 2,500. Now, I understand that over time, as price of production and supplies and wages go up, a cutoff point would indeed have to increase as well. But rather than increasing it gradually to help these creators adapt and adjust, they nearly doubled it instantly, which, as you can imagine, affected quite a fair number of indie creators. How many indie creators exactly? Everyone! Now, as most critics and longtime comic book historians can tell you, the indie market has been vital to the growth and development of comic books, providing some of the most iconic and creative titles of the 70s and 80s that really helped to progress the industry as a whole during those decades, and was one of the reasons comics went from being considered books for kids to being more widely accepted forms of art. However, with this one move, Diamond delivered a massive blow to the indie market, forcing many indie creators to resort to calling comic book stores across the country themselves and personally asking them to buy directly from them, something that most stores are unwilling or unable to do. As you can imagine, this decision was not met favorably, with Comic Book Resources writing an article in response to it literally titled, "Is Diamond Comics the Devil?" And that was back in 2009, before Comic Book Resources became the king of clickbait. But at least Diamond left the bigger publishers alone, right? I mean, as long as you hit that 2,500 cutoff point, then Diamond would allow you to print whatever book you want without any interference in any way. Yes, even before Diamond was running the distribution game, they were swinging their big dollar energy around and trying to influence the comic book landscape. In 1986, the critically acclaimed series from Eclipse Comics, Miracle Man, released an issue that depicted a rather realistic birth scene with pretty vivid details. The book got some complaints about, but that was nothing new for a series known for pushing boundaries, so it largely didn't affect them. That is, until Steve Geppi, the founder and president of Diamond Comics, expressed his disgust for the issue. That's fine, he's allowed to have his opinions, but it didn't stay just opinions. He actually wrote to all the retailers who he supplied books to and told them that they were disgusted by this book and they wouldn't carry this title anymore, saying, quote, "Diamond values its retailers too much to take chances on such a dangerous situation. We are not censors. We no more want someone to decide for us than you do. We cannot, however, stand by and watch the marketplace become a dumping ground for every sort of graphic fantasy that someone wants to live out." He's talking about childbirth, right? I mean, Wolverine chops like 9 people's heads off in every issue of X-Men, while the team is literally hanging out in a sex club. But this is the thing that he has a problem with. You know what? I'm not going to get into it. Just walk away, Aaron. Just walk away. Not the time. Geppi went on to launch a campaign for stricter censorship in comics, and while he did lose some business from retailers, many other stores felt pressured into supporting him for fear of what might happen to their store if they crossed their distributor, and they began writing to comic book companies in support of stricter guidelines. Now, we talk about how Midtown Comics shipping DC Comics to other comic book stores could be seen as a conflict of interest, but can you imagine what this was like back in the 80s? Can you imagine the company who helps you stock your store telling you, "Hey, we don't like something in one of the books you ordered, so we're not going to carry it anymore. And we're going to make a push for companies to stop making material like this, and you don't have to support us on this. But if you did, then we, the people who ship you your books, might remember it fondly." That sounds insane, and yet that's exactly what happened. Heck, it didn't even stop there. Geppi went on the Washington-based news show Eyewitness News and further decried this book and pushed for stronger censorship in the industry. And you know what happened? He got what he wanted. Marvel announced that starting next year, they would change their strategies to adhere to stricter interpretations of the Comic Code Authority, while DC announced new company guidelines limiting what types of stories their creators could tell. Now, when it comes to comics or movies or games, I constantly see people accusing companies of censorship. That's a term that the internet loves to throw around. But in all honesty, often when people complain about censorship, What they're actually complaining about is that the company made a decision that they just didn't like. The company decided to change a character's costume, or stop a character from smoking or drinking in one of their books, and that's entirely up to them. They're absolutely allowed to do that. That's not censorship, that's just the company deciding to go in a different direction, and you disagree with that direction. But this? Using your power over a store to demand that they tell a third party to restrict what their creators can do? That's almost the exact definition of censorship. So okay, Diamond had kind of a sleazy history in their rise to be the #1 comic book distributor, and the fact that they're a monopoly is troubling. But at least they have a good relationship with stores. At least they run a smooth operation that has helped comic book stores survive over the years and have strived to live up to a high standard of quality.
Oh wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
Yeah, you guys will have to excuse me for not being very eloquent right now, but I can't really think of any other way to phrase it. Diamond is just bad at what they do. I've mentioned this several times before, but for about 5 years I worked at a comic book store, and for 4 of those 5 years, one of my jobs was checking in all the orders that we got from Diamond. I would take them directly from the truck, open up the boxes, and count through everything to make sure that we got what we ordered. Spoiler alert, we didn't get what we ordered. Like, ever. We would have books with bent corners, scratches, ripped off covers. We would often get books that were just cut clean in half. I don't even know how that happened, but it was a regular recurring thing. And I know you might be saying, well, that might not be Diamond. That could have been the printers, or that could have been the delivery guy. True, it could have been them, but Diamond wasn't exactly trying to help with any of this stuff. Diamond would pack 250 books, $1,000 worth of material, all into one cardboard box that just had one tiny microscopic strip of cardboard on top and another one on the bottom, and that was it to protect all that merchandise from the elements. I order a $3 bag of gummy worms off Amazon. They pack so much bubble wrap around that thing it could survive the apocalypse. But with this thing that would decide whether or not our stores continue to stay in business, they kept putting them in boxes that if you sneezed on them, your books would be damaged. And that would be if we got the issues in at all. I am not kidding you when I say that when I check these books in, I would have a list that I would have to list off any missing issues that we had. And it was considered a good day when we only filled in one page. Not one item on that page, no, an entire page of missing issues. And I'm not talking about missing 1 or 2 issues from a title that we ordered, or even 3 or 4 or 5. No, in all honesty, that's understandable. Not for multiple titles every single week, but when you're ordering that many books and you're shipping out that many books, eventually you are going to miss 1 or 2 here or there. No, I'm talking about missing 100 or more copies of a book. Yes, we would often order 500 or more copies of a series, and we just wouldn't get any of it in an entire week. Just the entire order, just Thanos style of existence. Have you ever gone to your local comic book store and you knew that there was an issue coming out that you were looking forward to, and you made it clear to the person who worked at your local comic book store that you were looking forward to that issue and you wanted them to reserve you a copy, and you made it clear that they were reserving that copy, and they clarified to you, yes, we are reserving that copy, so everybody knew you were getting a copy reserved for you, and then you show up there at the store and they didn't have any copies for you? Yeah, I don't want to speak on behalf of your local store because I don't know what's going on with them, but just speaking from my own personal experience, I can almost guarantee you it's not the store's fault on this one. I have worked a lot of jobs in my life, checked in a lot of merch in my time, and I do not say this lightly when I say I have never, ever seen a company that had a worse track record for delivering products than Diamond. And considering that that is the #1 thing they're supposed to do, and they're a monopoly, so there's no one else we can turn to about this, that's not good. That's actually really bad for the entire industry. And just to make it clear to everyone that it's not just me, before I started recording today's video, I went online and started looking around, and yes, right now there are a lot of comic book stores out there who are praising Diamond and saying that they want them to stick around because they are afraid that something could happen to them. But before that was a concern, there were numerous forums out there made up of comic shop employees just basically saying the exact same thing that I just said. Just complaining about how bad Diamond was at delivering their products. So I can guarantee you, it's not just me. Diamond's just that bad. But what are you gonna do? They're a monopoly. It's not like you can go to anyone else. There's nothing that we can do about this situation. Until now, that is. Yes, that brings me to the point of today's show. Folks, I know that we live in an uncertain world, and at a time like this, you just want some stability. But sometimes stability is bad. If the thing that you've been living with for decades now isn't working and never worked, then you might need to change things up. But it was kind of impossible for publishers to leave Diamond because that would require them to take some time off to readjust things, and in the comic world, you can't exactly take a few weeks off. And even if you did make a change, Diamond was just too powerful to compete with. Back in '95, Marvel tried exactly what DC is doing now, and it quickly failed. But now Diamond is, well, they're kind of broke, to put it lightly. They're currently unable to pay their own bills, so they can't exactly throw around their big influence and shut down any challengers. And because of a pandemic shutting down the entire world for a few months, comic book companies finally have that spare time to check some things off their to-do list, like clean out the garage, repair that old car that they've been tinkering around with, or, alright, fix arguably the most broken side of your entire industry. This is a problem that's needed to be addressed for a long time now, and now is kind of the only time it can actually be addressed. And I know that there is a chance that this could lead to an increase in prices, or certain stores no longer gain their books that they need, especially outside of America, but there's an equal chance it could actually lead to better deals and more access. As I said, Diamond is broken, and they never needed to fix themselves because they knew that there was nobody else you could go to. But if there is now someone else you can go to, that somebody is going to try and have to be better than Diamond, which might actually force Diamond to try and be better as well. And I know some people worry that because one of DC's new distributors is a part of Midtown Comics, this means that Midtown might try and take over for your local comic book store, but I don't think that's going to happen. Midtown, like any company out there, wants to make as much money as they possibly can, and they've now realized they can only make so much money as a comic shop, and they can now make even more money by going to the other side of the business and becoming a provider. Years ago, my boss at the comic shop I worked at said something that I think rings true here, which is that all comic shops are in business with each other, and each time one of them goes down, it decreases sales nationwide, which hurts the publishers, and that hurts the other stores. So I can only assume that the people at Midtown don't want to see other stores shut down so that way they can sell their books. They want those stores to succeed, and they've just realized that they can make a profit off of other stores succeeding if they're the ones distributing books to them. So as I said, don't think that just because you've known an establishment your entire life and that's how it's always been, means that's the way it's supposed to be. Sometimes long-running establishments are broken and need to change, and that's what's happening with Diamond. And will it lead to something better? Well, we'll have to wait and see, but again, speaking as someone who has had years of experience with Diamond, it can't exactly get worse. But that's it. That is the end of our episode for this week. I want to thank you guys for tuning in and sticking around all the way until the end. Let me know your thoughts on the whole Diamond situation in the comments down below. And since this is the end of the episode, it's when I go off script and just give you guys my final 2 cents on the whole situation. And I just want to say, yes, I am aware that I might have gotten a little bit ranty and gone off on a bit of a tangent on this week's episode, but I have a history with Diamond. Anybody who has worked in a comic book store does. And it was just so odd to me to see that after this story came out, the entire internet rose up and just said, "No, not Diamond! We can't have something happen to Diamond! Guys, we have to save Diamond!" And all I could think was, I'm sorry, Have we been living in the same universe here? I saw all of you complain about Diamond over the past couple of years. Where did all of this support suddenly come from? It'd be like if they announced that the giant garbage fire in the middle of the town was gonna be moved over to the side, and they're gonna take some of that and put it in another garbage dump, and maybe that garbage dump wouldn't be on fire, but either way, that garbage fire will at least be smaller, I guess. And then all of a sudden you saw people rising up and going, "No, not the garbage fire!" It's like, what? Yes, the garbage fire. Do something about that. So yeah, I had some stuff to get off my chest about this whole thing. But before we go, there is one other thing that I want to mention off the script here at the end, which is that there's a lot going on in the world, as I mentioned several times throughout the course of this video. Stuff that is way more important than the future of comics, and considering that this show is all about comic books, you know that I really mean that then. At the time of this recording, the Black Lives Matter protests are going on across the country, in fact across the entire world, and I just want to say that we here at the Professor Thorgy channel do believe that Black Lives Matter. We do support these protests, and in the description of the video down there, you are going to find a link to some charities that are doing a lot of good work right now. In fact, if you are a member of the Professor Thorgy Patreon, you might have noticed I didn't charge you guys for this month, so if you suddenly find yourself with a little bit of extra cash for this month, you find that there was something that should have gone out of your bank account but suddenly didn't, yeah, that was me. If you do want to do something with that money, donate to one of the charities down there in the description down below. That's all. I just wanted to throw that in there at the end. When it comes to talking about really serious stuff in the real world, I'm not the most eloquent, so I hope that all that came out okay, but I just wanted to say, everybody out there, just stay safe, remember to wash your hands, take care of each other, and thank you very much for tuning in. Bye, everyone.